Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Buckeye Blitz podcast. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join me. I appreciate it. If you could, hit that like button, help us surface with other Buckeye-related football content. I'd appreciate it. So one thing you may notice, I am not wearing a hat today, so if I look a little different, I don't have my hat on. But anyways, I just got back from Waco, Texas, so thanks for allowing me to have a little break. I took my wife. We went away for the first time without our children since we've been married, so that was fantastic. My wife works for a local company that does home reorganization called Simple Spaces Ohio, ran by some wonderful ladies. So if you need some reorganization, I'd reach out to them. They're good people. And so we went to the Magnolia Farm and all the, gifts and those kind of things for Fixer Upper, the TV show. So my wife was very happy and we had a good time. So enough about that. On to Buckeye football. So if you haven't checked out our Facebook page, I've seen quite a bit of activity on our Facebook page. It's the Buckeye Blitz podcast. I do reels. I posted some reels of the spring game. I update things that are going on during the week in between my podcast sessions, and I try to drop content that I think is relevant to Buckeye football. So give that a follow, give it a like, and stay up to date. With that said, I wanted to kind of continue the updating of things. So my last podcast, I talked a lot about the offense, kind of where I thought they were, and I mentioned that they almost had to dive into the transfer portal for a right tackle, and they did. They brought in Josh Simmons. No slight to Tegra or Zen. I was hoping beyond hope that they would come around, that they'd be ready. Tegra, I think with another year, that's entirely possible. That, if he can just plays at right tackle, they had him at guard last year. So I think, that's a big change. It's a big switch. And so I fully expect, that he'll have a legitimate shot if he continues to play at right tackle. He's got the size. So we'll see there. But they go out to the portal. They bring in Josh Simmons. He started 13 games for San Diego State. If you haven't heard, I feel like that's a really good get. Somebody that started at a Power 5 school. A lot of people I follow and listen to question, is San Diego State at the level that Ohio State is? The answer is no. However, he was a 4-star. He's got a year starting under his belt. So he's already played the position and he started at the position. And I think that, that in and of itself helps. I remember when they brought Jonah Jackson in, I kind of questioned that coming from Rutgers too. I know Rutgers is a Big Ten school, but I trust Josh Fry. He recruited him when he was at UCLA, so he knows the kid well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there, but I expect him to be our starting right tackle this year. Other notes. So I had mentioned Caleb Brown was having a really, really good spring. And I'm sorry to see that he entered the transfer portal. There were two from the 2021 class, Caleb Burton and Caleb Brown. I thought Caleb Brown had a shot to make some moves on special teams this year. But snaps at the slot were going to be few and far between and probably really, really late in games. So I'm sorry to see him go. And honestly, one of the two were who I was thinking might enter the transfer portal. I'm not going to name the other one. I don't put people in the transfer portal. But, from an offensive perspective, I understand, because there's a lot of depth there. So, but not who I thought would enter. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm going to do a recruiting show on Friday, talk a little bit about the role that Ohio State's been on and how good they've been doing and how impressed I am with what they've brought in so far. Do think they need to add some more on defense, but the pipeline is churning and we're looking pretty good in that 2024 class. So, the other thing that is really impressive to me, and I'll kind of leave it at this and switch over into the defensive side of the ball is that Ohio State didn't really have that many kids enter the transfer portal, even with the depth at quarterback and linebacker and safety and the logjam at wide receiver. It's pretty crazy to me that all those kids stuck around. And all that tells me is what an awesome culture Coach Day is building in Columbus. Because honestly, if a lot of kids in today's world with the NIL and the wide open transfer portal probably would have taken off. And so that tells me everything I need to know, at least right now, about what kind of person and coach and the things that they're teaching those kids that Coach Day is. So with that said, I'm going to switch over to the defense. And I want to say this. It's natty or nothing this year. I looked at this team. I looked at the talent on this team. I look at what's around, and they need to win it this year. And I also need them to beat Michigan. I am so tired of the Twitter heroes chirping about Michigan. Ohio State has had 2 7-win streaks in the last 20 years over Michigan. And you really would have thought that Michigan went undefeated and won the national championship last year, the way that they chirped. And I'm kind of tired of it. So they need to shut them up hard come November. So switching gears, because I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. I was a little annoyed about all the chirping. So as promised, the state of the defense. I don't talk a lot about the draft. I really don't. I kind of sort of follow the NFL, but Ohio State football keeps me busy enough that I don't really need to. I watch who gets drafted in the NFL from Ohio State. Occasionally, I'll catch a Browns game. Because of my where I'm at. However, the fact that only one Ohio State defensive starter from last year was drafted in the top 3 rounds, and that was Zach Harrison, should tell you everything you need to know about who was starting on defense last year and why many of us, like I've seen, if you follow Jay Book and some others from the Bucknut site, many of us think that Ohio State has a issue with seniority and playing guys that have been in the program a really long time over younger guys that are probably and most definitely better. I'm not going to pick on anybody in particular, but I'll give you an example of the fact that Jerron Cage was in there and had more snaps than Mike Hall or Tyleek Williams. And I know that people were dinged up. I know they were dinged up. Don't come at me about that. I know they were, but still, that in and of itself kind of tells me everything I need to know, at least about last year. And I know that, you may hear Jim Knowles say, well, we were just instilling the defense. I was still getting to know the guys, but talent is talent, and the proof's in the pudding, essentially, so to speak. And if people aren't making plays, then you need to put people in there that will. So that alludes to, or I guess refers back to my statement earlier, that this team has so much talent. There's a ton of talent on the defense, and that if Knowles can't keep the big plays in check and can't get over the hump with the amount of veteran and young talent that's on this defense, it reminds me of the 2015 team. He won't be here next year. Quite honestly, I'm just telling you. Like, I'm calling it out right now, like I see it. After watching the spring game, the way that the defensive backs performed, the way that the defensive line performed, and then seeing the depth at linebacker and those young guys playing, there's too much talent not to play like A or A+ football on defense. So, what happens remains to be seen. However, if everything I saw at the spring game holds true, everybody stays healthy. For the most part, winning a natty and winning the Big Ten is not far out of the question for us. And I think that has to be said, and I think that the defense needs to have a big part in that. And I'm going to go off on a small little thing here I have in my notes. So a lot of people hang the losses of the last 2 years of Michigan and then the Georgia game. I don't think as much the Georgia game around C.J. Stroud, but honestly, like C.J. threw for over 300 yards in both games against Michigan. It was the defense that let him down. I mean, Ohio State could have ran away with the game this year in the shoe in the second quarter if they could have gotten any kind of rhythm on offense. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were starting a linebacker at running back. But for the first time in that year, there's a lot of things you can point to. But if the defense holds up, if the defense can hold its water, and we're not giving up 85-yard, 90-yard touchdowns 5 times a game, we're going to be in good shape. So from what I saw, kind of getting back on track here, I am really impressed, like more so than I thought I would be, seeing the defensive line live. So JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, Mike Hall, Jack Sawyer, and then Kenyatta Jackson, Ty Hamilton, Caden Curry, all as advertised. And I will say too, seeing Hero Kanu up close and personal too at the spring game, he looks the part too. I think he could be in line for. I actually think he could play the 3 technique. I don't know. We'll see. So I think they look really, really good. These guys look like the rushmen of old. Perhaps, that year of experience under the belt. I know JTT had all the talent in the world, but he hadn't played, a ton of football. And putting Jack Sawyer's hand back down in the dirt, as a lot of us have talked about already. And then Mitch Melton being back and taking over that Jack position, so Jack Sawyer doesn't have to worry about it. These guys are ready. I really feel like, that front 4, front 5, if you include the Jack, I think they're going to have a big year. And I expect there to be at least 2 players on defense with 6 sacks each. I think one of them will be Mike Hall. I'm just going to say it right now. If he stays healthy, Mike Hall is a game wrecker and lives in the backfield. So the other thing, like I said, JTT, Sawyer, and Tyleik are all, in my opinion, and maybe even Ty Hamilton, in contract years for the NFL. So they need to have monster years. They're all heading into their 3rd year. I know that a lot of us have been very spoiled from both Bosa's and Chase Young coming in as freshmen and just being ready to dominate. And I think probably last year, Caden Curry probably could have, at least the first half of the year, if he didn't have a bunch of people in front of him. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen or can't happen, but with what we saw from Zach Harrison, I think people thought he was going to be the guy to do that, and he didn't. And JTT, same thing. Sawyer, same thing. So I like what I see on the defense. That those years of experience now coming into fruition, and I think they're going to be on the up and up and looking good. The last thing I'll mention is I said last year, I thought Harrison and Hall and even JTT were like a half second away from way more sacks, multiple sacks, and a lot of that is on the back end of the defense because guys were just running around open in the back end of the defense. So the reason I mentioned that is because I wanted to jump to the defensive backs before I get to the linebackers. So since the DBs are now healthy, I looked over kind of, what I thought. And that's something I paid a lot of attention to in the spring game, the depth and then also where I thought we would be. So Denzel Burke added weight, and he looks like he's back. He looks like he's back to the old Denzel Burke. He's turning around looking for the football. Davison Igbinosun is as advertised. If he doesn't have the second half of the year like he did at Ole Miss last year, he had some, and I think that's just legs. Like he just wasn't used to playing that amount of football. And then Jordan Hancock and Jair Brown have both had fantastic springs. Jair Brown just keeps showing up and showing up and showing up. And that guy, I think he's in line for some reps at the nickel this year for sure, and he'll be in on the dime package. And then we have Jermaine Matthews here already, so they look like they are close to being back to BIA. They have to prove it on the field, but the talent is there. And again, I'm basing all of this on talent right now. And then, obviously, as the safeties, Lathan Ransom is also in a contract year for the NFL. He could play himself into a late first rounder or into that conversation if he has a monster year this year, because he's obviously incredibly talented. Sonny Styles is here, and then you bring in Lorenzo Styles Jr., adding depth, Kai Stokes, and also Jahard Carter from Syracuse. I like the safety room a lot. Josh Proctor came back. So I really like where we are with the safeties altogether. I think that defensive backfield looks light years better to me than it did last year. And I know that, we were down Jordan Hancock. I know people were really hoping Cam Brown could shake it loose, and stay healthy and be the guy that we all thought he could be. And unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition. But, for now, things look really, really good in the secondary. And lastly, I wanted to touch on the linebackers. So Tommy Two Thumbs is back. I don't think we have much to worry about there. I think he has a chance to have an all Big Ten season again. Steel Chambers missed part of the spring. He had a foot ankle issue. He was on a little rolly cart at the spring game. And, so in his place, CJ Hicks and Cody Simon both played really, really well. And by the way, don't forget about Gabe Powers, who's also a stud. So there's a lot of depth there, a lot of talent there. And I think they're going to be okay far beyond this year. So as I said, all the pieces are there for a championship run. I think they need to stop the big plays. And I know a lot of us feel this way. And it just kind of nags at me, those big runs and the big pass plays against Michigan and Georgia in the biggest games of the year. So if they can do that, stop the big play, seal up the run game gaps, add about 10 to 12 more sacks, add in some interceptions and some sudden change for the offense, short fields to help Kyle McCord or Devin Brown, whoever the starter is. This team will be right in the thick of the playoffs. I think the defense can help carry them this year, whereas in the last several years, it's been the offense to help carry them there. So I'm excited to see that on Friday for Buckeye Friday. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a draft recap, and I'm going to get into a bunch of the questions that I have. Thanks again. Apologies. I've dropped some content last week and then some content on our Facebook page throughout the draft, but I was traveling. I was in Waco. Really great city, really great time. If you get a chance to go, I would advocate for that. I did enjoy myself, even though I'm not super into the design world and that kind of stuff. There is a lot to do. Got to see and go through the Dr. Pepper Museum, which was an experience for me because I love history. I will tell you, if you are planning to do the Alamo, leave yourself some time because Waco and San Antonio, if you don't live there, are quite far apart. It's about like driving from Cleveland to Cincinnati. So, a lot of people, have told me to make sure you have a couple days there to do the Alamo and the Riverwalk and that kind of stuff. I didn't get to go because of the distance, but if you do, just some advice for you. But that'll do it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you all on Buckeye Friday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining. And until then, see ya. Go Bucks.